To the average American worried about our country, Glenn Beck sounds good. He points out a lot of issues that most mainstream TV won't cover. He gives people a sense of security that someone is looking out for them. It is a false sense of security, and I hope to prove that to you by the end of this video.
If he's so intent on spending our money here at home, which I'm all for, in fact, let's not spend any money abroad or home for a while, what do you say? Why is he the lead sponsor of something called the Global Poverty Act? If I'm not mistaken, it is a almost 1% UN tax that we would be forced to pay, right?
It's 0.7% of gross national product.
It also puts us in line for what is also part of this UN, Millennium Agreement of banning all small arms.
They have a so-called Millennium Declaration that actually came out in 2000, which not only commits us to the more foreign aid spending, but calls on countries to implement Kyoto, a ban on small weapons.
I believe there's a socialist agenda there for America.
This is how Glenn Beck drags people in. He is warning us of a global UN tax and how the U.S. is going along with UN gun control programs. He also admits that the North American Union is a reality and that the New World Order is rising.
I hate to break it to you, but after 2 years of denying it and saying this can't be, it's the only reason that I have found that explains everything that's going on in our country with the border. Our country has been sold out in the name of global profits and votes at the ballot box. This is where the Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America, or SPP, comes in. Their mission is to blur or completely erase the borders between Canada, U.S., and Mexico. There is a global meltdown coming. It is a global depression, and one world currency and one world financial system is the end game. China said last week they want one global currency. France said yesterday or the day before that they want one world order, a new world order, at the end of this event.
But 1 month earlier, Glenn Beck had the president of Georgia on, but this time pushing the idea that the New World Order is about promoting freedom.
Continuing my conversation now with the president of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili. Mr. President, do you believe that this will end, Russia will end, if you are dead?
But the point here is, it's not about me, it's about the idea of freedom. It's about the future of the whole region. It's about the future of Europe and a new world order.
But there were large groups of people that were warning us about the North American Union and the New World Order long before Glenn Beck. Groups such as 9/11 truthers and Ron Paul supporters. Let's see what Glenn Beck has to say about them.
So when a comedian hosts his own big-time TV show and hears something coming from the audience other than applause, it can catch him a little off guard. That's what happened last Friday night during a taping of HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. It seems that some 9/11 truthers, as they like to call themselves, those who feel September 11th attacks were orchestrated by the U.S. government, were in the audience, and they started shouting things.
All they did was shout out questions about Building 7. How could a 47-story building collapse into itself without being hit by a plane? How could BBC and U.S. news stations be in the process of reporting the official line of how Building 7 collapsed when it was still standing? In this Fox broadcast, the announcers watched Building 7 collapse right after they got word from New York that another building fell.
I want to tell you that we are getting word from New York right now that another building has collapsed. I understand that this is a 47-story building. Do we have pictures of it? I guess that's smoke now. Correct me if I'm wrong in the control room, please. But is that smoke coming from this third collapse? Okay, that is what we're understanding, which makes sense because it looks like the sun. So that perhaps it wasn't as full as it might be normally around 5:30 on a Tuesday.
That information, of course, take a look at that right-hand side of the screen.
It's going down right now.
There it is.
Yep.
It went down right there. This is not from an explosion or an aircraft at this point, from our knowledge. The information that we have is that this is a building that probably was incredibly structurally damaged by the goings-on right next door at the World Trade Center and the two crashes that took place there.
So structural damage, as you had suggested.
The BBC announced the collapse about 23 minutes before the fact, and even featured a New York correspondent speaking of the collapse in past tense with a still erect skyscraper behind her.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing, and indeed it has. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost, as you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind...
I was wondering what it's felt like for you being in Manhattan. Well, unfortunately, I think we've lost the line with Jane Stanley.
5 minutes after Jane Stanley's video feed cuts out, here is CNN anchor Aaron Brown announcing that Building 7 has either collapsed or is collapsing about an hour before Building 7 collapsed.
We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7 in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing.
And again, Building 7 is right behind him, still burning. So, 9/11 truthers are labeled as idiots because they believe that there was some kind of cover-up on 9/11. But the official story of how Building 7 fell was being spewed out by the media hours before it even happened. No steel structure building ever collapsed by fire before 9/11. So how could the news know that fire caused Building 7 to collapse before it ever happened? But here's the first response of two major newscasters on the collapse of Building 7 and of the Twin Towers. The first video is Dan Rather's first response to watching Building 7 go down, and the second is Peter Jennings right after the first Twin Tower collapsed and his comments about it.
It's amazing. Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
We have no idea what caused this. If you wish to bring anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
I agree with Bill Maher on this one. Anybody who thinks that 9/11 was carried out by the government isn't a truther. They're idiots.
A Scripps Howard poll in 2006 suggested that more than 1/3 of the entire American population suspects the federal government either assisted in the 9/11 terror attacks or took no action to stop them so the country could go to war in the Middle East.
Can you actually imagine that our government was capable of successfully pulling off 9/11 and then keeping it off of the front page of the New York Times? No. These truthers are exactly the kind of people who want to rock this nation's foundation, tear us apart, and plant the seeds of dissatisfaction in all of us. Don't get me wrong, I think they do believe it, and which is why I believe these guys are dangerous. I believe these guys are anarchists that are looking to tear us apart. I mean, this is the kind of group that a Timothy McVeigh would come from.
9/11 truthers have never committed acts of violence nor promoted it. Yet they make the link of someone heckling Bill Maher to Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing.
This is the kind of group that a Timothy McVeigh would come from.
Yeah, that's right. That's what makes it a little bit scary. Somebody that would infiltrate a talk show like Bill Maher's show and then heckle him during the show. That's getting out there a little bit.
That's really getting out there. Heckling someone about politics on a show that is about politics. Wow, what a radical.